My name is Michelle Smith Quarles, and I'm here with my mom, Dr. Brenda Smith. And we are so honored and so excited to have been invited back to the conference for a second year by Reverend Leah Lewis. The conversation that we had last year was on intergenerational literacy. And so we wanted to sort of continue and pick up that conversation and extend it. And the way that we did it last year, where we were actually in an auditorium at East Cleveland Public Library, and we were able to sort of talk a bit and then open it up for a Q&A, for questions. And since this is still a conference and we want to sort of create that same feel and pull those of you who are watching into the conversation, we thought we would sort of think of some questions that you might be asking. We tried to think about what's going on in the country right now and going on in the African American community right now, and sort of link that to questions of literacy and the issues of education and literacy. And so we kind of anticipated some questions, and we're going to just kind of use those questions that we brainstormed to lead the dialogue that we're going to have.
Yeah. I wanted to start this time with some statistics, and these come from the seedsofliteracy.org website. I looked for a definition of functional illiteracy and some statistics on that to kind of get us going. So I'll start with the definition. Functional illiteracy is defined as having math, reading, or language skills below a fourth grade level. The statistics for Cleveland are that 66% of Cleveland residents are functionally illiterate, and that some Cleveland neighborhoods have an illiteracy rate as high as 95%. Yeah, and another very interesting fact was that a mother's reading skill is the greatest determinant of her children's future academic success, and that outweighs other factors like neighborhood and family income. And I didn't know that. Okay.
It's really interesting that you said that, and you told me a couple of days ago. And then a friend of mine who is working at her sister's daycare hit me up on Facebook. Can you help me? Talked to her yesterday when I was at your house, and she has a third grade boy, black boy, CMSD student. Because of the quarantine, his mother has pulled him out and put him in the K through 12 online program. So she's homeschooling, but because she's working, she's taking him to the daycare during the day. Okay. And my friend is helping him navigate his online curriculum. Okay. So as she sits down with him, first day, third grade, time for the ELA, the English Language Arts lesson, she could tell immediately he can't read. Mm. So she was calling me to help her to brainstorm how to get him up to speed. But to connect back to that piece about the mother, she sent some spelling work home with him, and it was rhyming. And she said that when he gave her the answers, a lot of his rhymes were slang words. So she said something like fish, and it was like blackish. Okay. And stuff like that. And so she said she was telling him, well, you can't make up words. You have to really try to find like sort of dictionary words to match within the lexicon, right? Yeah. Mainstream English or standard English. We're trying to build your vocabulary. And he was like, well, I didn't do that. My mom did it. So one of the things she had called to ask me was how to talk to the mother about her, to sort of keep her involved in the process, but sort of orient her towards the kind of proper way, the way that we're building his vocabulary. We want to get his mainstream and standard English up to the level. Mm-hmm. So kind of try to guide her without hurting her feelings or upsetting her or alienating her. Mm-hmm. So we were trying to think about ways to phrase that, and I told her, when I talked to her, I said, it's so funny. My mom literally just told me that the kids' literacy is dictated by the moms. I said, so what I think we educators are going to find is that we're going to have to start helping our peers.
Yeah.
the adults
Definitely.
to do better with literacy if we want the kids to do better
with literacy. And then you have to fold in the whole thing with social media now, because that's a whole other field of language acquisition and reading and writing, spelling.
Yes.
Okay, all of which goes into that. And particularly now that a lot of the students are doing virtual learning, we've got to. So you have to look at that from the perspective of the children, the students, and you also have to look at that from the perspective of the parents, because they've got to help these children, and a lot of them are
it's
experiencing
it's
difficulty.
Two things. It's the information literacy piece. So we talk about literacy and we talk about language and reading and writing, but it's the information literacy piece, which is when we know how to use tech, how to research, because a lot of times these parents are going to have to find the answers, right. For these things because the teacher's not accessible, or even research so you can figure out how to teach your kids something. So it's it's both the language literacy and then the information literacy. And then the other thing that I think I'm worried about is when we were in the classroom versus tech, it was two very separate environments, right? I'm in the classroom, and so most of us know the code switch. We know to leave the slang and the cursing and all of that outside of the classroom. We're in the classroom now, and teachers sort of create that space. And then when I'm on the phone or I'm at home on the laptop, that's tech. And so then I can do the abbreviations and do the slang, and I don't have to worry about punctuation. I don't have to worry about spelling. But now that school is on the computer, I'm worried about the ability to code switch.
Well, and you have to know the correct way
in order to switch.
Sure. Okay.
In the first place.
So that does become a problem. And the other thing is, we talk about reading skills and writing skills and math skills, but there's another component to literacy too, and that's the ability to think critically. Okay. Problem solving, and all of that is inextricably connected as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And the critical thinking piece too speaks to the information that you get online, right? Because it's an unbridled territory. People can put anything online. And so the democracy of that is great, right? Because then you don't have to be a scholar or a published author to put something out there. But the downside of that is that a lot of it is not factual. A lot of it is not true. A lot of it is outdated. A lot of it is biased. So the critical thinking piece becomes important because when we do college,
to be able to discern,
what's factual, what's reputable, what's reliable. Right. And so that's another kind of literacy. That's that information literacy piece.
And an example of that is, in teaching composition, I never let my students use Wikipedia.
No, cannot.
You cannot use
I have literally changed Wikipedia entries. Because you can.
Because,
you can hit
well,
edit.
That's why.
And you can, and I have literally for punctuation or spelling reasons, just because that's my tick as an English teacher. So I'm like, well, if I can do that, anybody can do it. And nobody is fact checking because nobody is spell checking or grammar checking it. So nobody is fact checking it either. And so knowing where to go, knowing, we would teach them in composition, you want something that is .edu or .gov rather than .com, because com means commercial, which means people bought the URL and it can be anything. They bought the site and they can put anything up and unless it's criminal, they're not really beholden to anybody to be factual or for it to be true. And then also even the ones that are sort of established, because we just know from Fox News, it's established, it's legit, but we know it's slanted, it's biased.
I have, and I thought I should have brought that, but I can make it available for anybody that's interested in getting it. I have a chart with all of the news outlets, that are on television, papers, magazines, all of the, all of the news outlets.
So MSNBC, CNN.
And all of them. Okay. The Atlantic, the Washington Post, Fox,
New York Times.
BuzzFeed,
Okay.
Brexit, all of them.
Okay.
And on this chart, it shows you, which are questionable. Okay.
So the spectrum.
Yeah, it gives you the
From
whole
the most
spectrum,
trusted to-
which are most reliable, which are, biased, which are more politically bent, which are, and I should have, but if anybody is interested in that,
We can share the link.
I'll share the link. I'll email it to you, okay? But I use that in my class,
Yeah.
so that students, when they start to do their research, because a segment of the composition class is, as a matter of fact, the last half of the class is learning how to research. So that goes into critical thinking and reading, and all of that is combined. And that's one of the things
Tools
that I use, so they'll know when they're doing their research
where they can go,
and where they shouldn't go. But they have to be kind of careful with. So if so you can let
Leah.
You can let Leah know if you're interested in that. I will make it available. I'll make it available for everyone.
I want to sort of piggyback on the piece about research.
Okay.
Because what I'm finding, like, for example, Kaya, the baby, I was concerned about some of her behavioral things, being home, right? From the,
because a big part of being in the
quarantine.
classroom is social. Is social too. I mean, there's the academic piece of it, but our children get their socialization
from school. So I was seeing things, right, that maybe there was a little bit of depression, what was going to happen with her, like you said, development until she's going into 8th grade, 13. So I started to research, and I think when we talk about literacy and these kids being home, because I think the quarantine is a big thing. We still don't know how long this is going to last. And so it makes parents more responsible for education than we typically are. I think those of us who kind of have the time, have the resources, have the knowledge, and then on top of that, the confidence, we're maybe a little bit more involved in our kids' education anyway. And then some of us, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources, we don't have the knowledge, we weren't given the knowledge, or we just don't have the confidence. And so we kind of leave it to the teachers, the professionals. But now we all kind of have to do it.
Yeah.
I think research is really important. So that's where the information literacy, again, looking for answers, going and looking for answers. I think the things that we kind of leave to the teachers, or the teachers come to us and they say, I've noticed this, here are these resources, or the counselor comes to us, or the intervention specialist, they do that for us. We have to start to do that and find answers. And so that means really being on top of our own game as far as being readers and researchers.
That's true.
And I'm so concerned about that, because I think when we talk about intergenerational and problems in the schools, we like to blame the victim in structural sort of racism and violence. We like to say, well, the kids are not learning the way that they should because of the kids.
Yeah.
And we know that it's not
necessarily
true. The schools are structured in a way where kids who don't have a lot of money, kids of color, kids who are different learners with different levels of ability, different, neurodiverse, language stuff, they don't get what they need. And I think parents, they have to sort of now kind of look in the mirror and be a little bit honest about what they did and didn't get, right? We're not responsible for educating ourselves, so we really have to strip the ego away, but also the shame away. So the deficits, like the holes, the pieces that we didn't get, now's the time to really start to think about that and fill those blanks in, because you have, now it's your job to help them.
To help your, yeah.
And I remember just when I was teaching at Bryan and Stratton, and the majority of the students at Bryan and Stratton were single moms, 20 to 29 Black women. And I remember this one student, so clear, she was like 27, and she was taking remedial math. She was taking, sort of the lowest level of math, and she was so serious about it. And one day we were in the basement, and her friends were like, girl, let's go to the casino and go to the buffet and have lunch. And she was like, no, I'm not, I gotta go to math. And they were teasing her, oh, girl, it's just one class. But she was so determined, because her daughter was second, third, whatever grade, you learn to divide.
Okay.
And she didn't know how to divide. She knew she didn't. She said that was the place where math just stopped making sense to her.
Okay.
But she wanted to learn how to divide
so
before her daughter learned.
Help her.
Before her daughter learned. Okay. So she could help her and be ahead of her. And I just remember thinking, like, how wise she was to know that if a 7 or 8 year old is coming home, you kind of have to know more. You kind of have to be able to answer their questions. I think when they get to college, it's okay because it's specialized. So we studied something different. So if you don't know as much about biology as your kid, well, that's because your kid is getting a degree in biology. You got your degree in something else, or you got your diploma, you didn't do. That's fine. But I think until they get to about 16, 17, 18, you have to know. There is something I think that happens when they realize that you don't know. And so I think we do have to start to, I ran into that this week myself, even as somebody that's college educated. I'm horrible at math.
Okay.
And she hit functions.
Okay.
And I don't remember them. I don't know what I said, you talking about function on the computer, you talking about print? You talking about save? Because I don't know what you're talking about. And then I had that moment of, Michelle, okay, you got to sit your butt down. And now she got the textbook. You got to go in there at night.
Well, I might be able to. I didn't know that. I didn't know that's where she was.
That's where we are.
Okay.
And so, but again, she was kind of looking at me like,
you mean what do you mean you don't know?
Yeah. Right? And I was like, I'm rusty. Yeah. Then I'm online.
And I mean, and the whole thing with that is too, and I don't know, because some people have larger support systems, but if mom and dad don't know, okay, check with auntie, check with
the village.
Yeah, you have to go out into the village and find what it is you need at that point. It doesn't just have to be just mom and dad.
And sometimes it's the tools.
That's true.
I think making things available. We always had a million books in the house because you taught English and dad was law. So we had all his law books and all of your literature books. And then when I showed interest in having a library of my own, you built that. So then you had, like you said, my grandma was giving me books, and Maddie Melton, my great grandmother, was giving me books. And when I was in my aunt's room and she was braiding my hair, if there was a book on the shelf and I saw it, that's how I found For Color Girls, because the picture to me looked like Auntie Cheryl. And I said, and she said, well, go ahead. And so, it's the tools too. Sometimes it's not necessarily, you don't have to be a genius. Yeah. You don't have to be a teacher. But if you provide the tools, some of that stuff will happen. So make and not just tech. Not just tech.
That's true. Books are, and I always used to think about that, because for a lot of people, if you give them a book, that's not a gift to them.
It's punishment.
That's punishment. Okay. It's got to be a toy. It's got to be a,
tech or shoes,
or jewelry or something like that. But, we were big in terms of, here's a book.
Okay. My friend who just had a baby, she put books on her when she had a shower. They were in a registry.
Okay.
Like the beginning books.
That's good.
And she's and then reading to them. because that's twofold. It encourages their literacy. It improves yours. If you need that. And then the other thing, because I'm a writer, so the other thing that you should do, because
make them right.
And like in two ways.
When a child, I'm always surprised to hear a child starting school and they cannot spell their name. Minimally. Okay. That always, because, I remember, I mean, it's who you are. It's, and so minimally that. My mother used to sit me down at, just in the living room in the evening after, we had dinner or whatever. And, sometimes I'd be writing on a brown paper bag. Okay. But but she taught me to spell my name, in preparation for going to school. And if you see some of the the old book, I mean old books, because at this point, okay. But if you see some of the, which I still have, some of the books that we had when I was growing up, you'll see that I went in all the books and wrote my name
on your books. And
they weren't mine.
Oh. Oh Lord.
Those were not all my books, okay? But that was once I learned, I just went and wrote my name in. So minimally that those are the kinds of things you can do. I always
easy.
They are. I always say too, and I say this and people go, but I didn't baby talk you. You or your sister. No. Okay, when I was aware that you were at that stage where you were going to start to acquire language, when you started saying words and speaking yourselves, I talked to you.
And saying the proper
terms for
teaching them, because
right.
The confusion of communication when you have a special name for everything, and then they go in the world and they're asking for something, and everybody doesn't have the same nickname for it.
That's right.
So I know I remember Kai called her Sippy her ba. If she walked up to a random person and was like she used to do us and be like, my ba, they'd be like, is that your mother, your father? Is it a lamb?
We don't know what you're talking about.
Are you African? I don't know what's happening.
So those are the building blocks. Yeah. I mean, and like you said, those don't cost a lot. That, you just have to stay aware of that. I read bedtime stories. Yes. Okay. And like you said, not only was it good for you all, but
for us,
it helped me.
And you gave, I could think of 3 things: a diary, which will make them write. I had a Ramona Quimby, because that was my girl.
Was your girl.
Beverly Cleary, Ramona Quimby, red and white. I can see it in my head, diary. And what it had was blanks. So there were prompts. Today and then I would write, I felt, and then I would write. So twofold, because it makes you write, and it also is that emotional intelligence piece, right? A diary helps with that.
Yeah.
And that's really important now in the quarantine.
That's
and
true.
With everything that's going on in the background of that, Black Lives Matter and stuff, they can write about what they feel. They can get it out. I think that's really important. I'm hearing a lot of parents talk about depression and anxiety. And I think this generation of kids has more of that. Perhaps we all did. But we know now about self-care and mental health, so we can see it and diagnose it. So you just hear is more of a conversation. So that's something. Another thing that
those are the kinds of things, again, that you don't need a lot of money to do. You can make
you can just get a spiral.
Yeah, get a spiral notebook. You can put the prompts in.
Or just say, write what you feel.
How are you feeling? Right.
Draw some pictures with it, and crayons and markers and some pencils. The other thing that you gave me, and this would probably be now a laptop or a tablet, but you gave me a typewriter.
I gave you a typewriter.
Because I'm also not that young. Black don't crack. And I'll be 44 next week. But I had a typewriter. And then when you would hear me typing, where another mother would be like, maybe go to bed or whatever. Now, if I was watching TV, you'd be like, go to bed. Go to bed. But if I was typing, you would let me stay up. And you wouldn't bother me. And I would just be typing. And you say you would walk by my door in the middle of the night and be like, okay.
Yeah, okay.
And then the other thing is, these products of that when they do write something, or they they do type something up or create something.
Engage with
that's right.
Engage
then
with
you
them.
read it,
Yeah.
and you
read
you,
it and ask questions.
ask questions about it, and
right.
say, oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome, and give them the praise and encouragement.
And you can get involved that way. And like I said, and that costs you nothing. Time, which you should be,
which is hard.
Invested, yeah, for some of it. But you can find.
We have to.
We have to find. Time. Like I said, a lot of things are because my mother was a working mother. So a lot of the things that we did right after dinner. Okay, we'd have dinner, and then everybody would do, homework or whatever it was. We were, and then as we got older, like you said, with a diary or whatever, you do that, and she would just ask, did you write anything in your diary today? And one of the things that we did is around the dinner table, because we've kind of gotten away from those kinds of things, which I happen to think
literacy is the spoken as well.
It's the spoken as well. So how was your day? What did you
learn today?
What did you learn today?
Josiah asked Micaiah that every day, even with the digital. He'll go in there when she logs off and say, and I've asked her, how did your classes go? And he'll say, well, what did you learn today? And it's a little bit trickier, but we still are sort of checking in.
Kind of, do those things. So.
And the other thing is with the books, and I have to.
Okay, we'll end with this.
Yeah, because my daughter is not a big chapter book. Surprise, surprise. I think it's rebellion because we're both English teachers. But I think we limit literacy to literary fiction, right? The kinds of books you would have gotten assigned in school.
Oh, no.
She reads manga, which is Japanese comic books. She reads fan fiction online, which are stories that fans of certain animated shows and video games, they write stories about the characters. She will be in her, and so I had to kind of loosen up, right? Because I was like, you're not reading. And then I realized she just sat on the bed with her tablet and for 2 hours read, just scrolling fan fiction. And so she is reading. So I think that's good too. Let them read what they want to read, and then they will read more. I think when we try to force, read To Kill a Mockingbird, or read the Bible, or read, but if you say, okay, you like you found out she liked My Hero Academia, and you went online and you bought them. And so it's still words, it's still story, it's still vocabulary, and it's that discipline of sitting down with a book. So I think that is a good thing too. And also,
I used to read this back of cereal boxes. I read what was there. What was available.
And the other thing is, for a parent, if you still have a difficult or challenging relationship to reading, to find your thing that you like to read. Because one of the reasons that I became the reader that I became is because I would see you sitting at the table or on the couch reading. My grandma would sit at the table and read. My great-grandmother would sit at the table and read. Dad would be studying for law school, and he would put me in his lap and make me read out loud. He would make me read the law books, and I'd be like, the jurisprudence of the man, and then I'd get bored and leave him alone, which is what he wanted. But I was able to sound words out, and big words didn't scare me, and it also built. And I'd be like, I know how to read law books, and I know what I was reading. But I could, So I think when we say intergenerational, it's the work that we want to get them to do, but it's also really
work that
doing some of the work that we might have to do and still do. Keeping up
it's constant.
Yeah, keeping up with it.
Yeah, it's constant.
Keeping up with it. Yep. So just to give people an idea of like what qualifies us to sit here and talk about all this, they like, who are these ladies?
Who are these ladies?
So retired English professor, Dr. Smith.
I am Professor Emerita.
Oh. Excuse us. excuse him. Yes. And
from Kent State University, I taught
33.
No, 15 years.
No,
I've
you
taught
taught
at the
English.
college and university level since 1986.
Yeah.
But
30 years.
Yeah, so I taught at Kent State University for 15 years. A tenured associate professor, and I retired last year, and this year I was conferred
Emeritus.
the emeritus.
And have taught at
Title.
Notre Dame, Ursuline, Cleveland State,
Tri-C.
Case, Tri-C,
Yeah, all of
University School,
those. Right, all of those.
Oberlin, right?
Mhm.
Right. And then me, and you got your PhD from
Case Western Reserve University.
right? And I got my master's from Case
Western
in
Reserve.
English, and have taught at Brighton and Stratton, Tri-C, Kent, and am now teaching for Literary Cleveland, Lake Erie Inc. I was a writer in residence at the Cleveland School of the Arts for CMSD. So, just to sort of let you know.
We have a pretty
little something.
Yeah, a pretty broad stretch of experience in what we're talking about.
The other thing, I'm going to say this
Okay.
because this is just one last thing.
Okay.
But the conversation that I was having with my friend about the third grade boy who was struggling, and she was trying to remember like spelling, and she said, how did we learn how to spell? And she had forgotten we used to get workbooks. And I've realized that they don't get them anymore.
Okay.
So
And spelling test every week.
and spelling tests every
And they
week.
don't do that anymore.
So one thing that I would
You can
encourage every parent to do is to do a little bit of research about sort of what the vocabulary is for your kid, like how many words they should have, because they have the sight words when they're kid, and there's a certain number of words they should have at a certain age. So you might want to look at their grade level or their age and do a little research about what words they should absolutely know. And then you might want to make your own vocabulary list, your own flashcards. And you might not want to give them the anxiety of a test, but that becomes something that you can do. Flashcards are just real easy, and do the meanings and do the spellings, because English is not a phonetical language. The words don't sound like they look.
And so a lot of it is memorization.
It's just memorization. You have to. I would never forget when my daughter came home and said "Why's phone phone" when she had been learning that F is f. And so the a lot of it is just rote memorization. We were exposed, and then remember we wrote the words 10 times and put them in a sentence. So they're home now, and these are things that you can do with them. To supplement, or if you are having a hard time with the log on, because I know a lot of people don't have their tech and they're having a hard time logging on, but you don't want them to just fall away from it. These are things you could do if the digital is not working.
It's not working.
Because for a lot of people it's not.
Thank everyone for listening, and we'd like to say that if you have any questions, you can pass those along to Reverend Lewis, and she can get those to us, and we will answer. We will respond. But thank you all very much.
And you can also find us both on Facebook.
On Facebook, yes.